Hey there, my name is Cole Adams, and you are watching the best college basketball podcast out there that covers the entire sport of college basketball, brackets, bubbles, and bid stealers. Now, here are your hosts, Sam Fetterman and Jonathan Lidskin.
Season 6, Episode 7 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. I am Sam Fetterman. That is Jonathan Lidskin. Second show of the day after our interview this morning. Jonathan, how you doing?
Doing great. Ready to get back at it, Sam.
And, of course, Kevin Sweeney is joining us. Kevin, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm good. Yeah, it's good to have the flow of decisions coming in after kind of weeks of questions. So, how we doing?
By the way, great background right now. Like, epic backdrop.
Yeah, it's hard to beat. Shout out to Chicago.
Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, we're posted up.
Yeah, it's a good spot. It's a good spot. Okay, so the first thing that I think I wanted to go over here when it comes to this NBA draft deadline, which is tomorrow, there's a lot fewer players that entered the NBA draft this year. I think I saw a number. It was like 105 down to like 65 or something. How do you think that? Obviously, that's because of the NIL market. Can you kind of dive a little deeper into that? Because how has that in particular aspect affected the NIL market in college basketball this year?
Yeah, a few things. Number one, I think this is something that has been probably overblown as being an NIL thing, when in reality, part of it's a COVID year thing. I know there was talk like, in 2021 or something, there were 319, I think was the number like thrown around. There was early entrants, and this year it's like down to 100, and now it'll whittle down even further. And the difference is that, like, in 2021, every single player had to enter the draft because everyone had more eligibility. Either 2020, yeah, and like so that changes, right? It's just a different world. And so, look, it's absolutely true that there are fewer guys entering the draft, partially because there's no sense of screwing around in a process you have no business being a part of if you know that you are going to make good money in college. The like dream of maybe I play myself into a two-way with a draft workout, like that's not reality anymore, and like it's not beneficial anymore. There are many players, even in like sort of fringe power conferences, right? The A10, the Mountain West, et cetera, that are making more than two-way money. So you have bench players in the Big Ten and the SEC making more than two-way money. So there's really no desire for those contracts unless you're an older guy or you're someone that sort of misplays their hand draft stock wise. And so I think because of that, you just see a totally different environment in terms of interest in potentially turning pro. The one other thing I would note is that there have been some NIL contracts, and I think I've tweeted this or reported this at SI at some point. It's been discussed a few places. Some NIL contracts were written not allowing players to enter the draft. Like if they're going to take their money, you could not also test the waters because we didn't want the uncertainty, right? And that's not everyone, right? Like Jalen Lowe is a good example of a guy who signs with Kentucky, still goes to the G League camp, et cetera. Mackenzie Mbako, same thing, makes his ways to the combine. But, JT Toppin, I think, is a good example of this, right? Like if you're JT Toppin and you have $3+ million on the table, I know it's reported to be 4. I think it was a little lower than that, but like we can quibble on numbers. And you're Texas Tech, like we want to make that commitment in our Big 12 Player of the Year, but we can't wait until May 27th to find out whether we're going to have them if we're going to commit, 30% of our budget to this guy, right? And I think that's a totally reasonable position by the school. It's something that the player has to consider. But like if you're JT and you went through the process last year, you got a good sense of kind of what you had available and what you didn't. And realistically, like your range. I think it's a myth that like guys like show up to the combine and magically shoot from like undrafted free agent to like late first round pick. It just doesn't happen. If anything, it's like media members catching up to what the NBA already believes. Right. So, I think that's so realistically, I think guys who didn't have a ton of stock, like someone like JT, where it's like, yeah, he's probably a second round pick. Maybe he's he's probably better than a 2-way, et cetera. Like if you're that type of guy, it just made sense to take the money now. And if you had to agree to not test the waters, you make that agreement.
Jonathan?
Yeah, no, I was just kind of gonna add on, and then Kevin said it. I think it's more just like, guys like Cedric Coward with the media, like just catching up on like what the NBA kind of already thought. Because like I think like the other kind of part of this is like the whole like measurable stuff that gets like kind of overblown. Like when the Ace Bailey measurements like come out, like yeah, like that stuff's concerning in some aspects, but like I don't think it dramatically like really changes that stuff.
For me, if you're buying Ace Bailey at 6'9", you're buying Ace Bailey at 6'7.5". Like you're not going to dramatically change your opinion on a player because he measured shorter. You already have watched him play real basketball with those measurements that are apparently real but wrong, and like that's kind of what I was trying to get at with that. But there are some players that we still.
The other thing I was going to say quickly on the Ace thing, people underestimate how much work NBA people do. Yes, it was probably a surprise to someone who like only does draft scouting via a spreadsheet that like the guy they had listed at 6'10" is actually 6'7.5". But like, number one, measurements are widely distributed like at every age. And so like Ace Bailey got measured at Hoop Summit last spring and was 6'7.25" without shoes. Like the idea that he was magically going to be 6'10", like no one in the NBA actually believed that. Everyone has that information. It's like very readily available. And then beyond that, every NBA team sent people to Rutgers. They went to practice or they went to a game, and like you stand next to the guy.
Yeah,
like, I've stood next to Ace Bailey. He's very tall. He's not 6'10". It's not like this isn't rocket science. So yes, I think there's a lot to the whole like catch up factor, and part of that's just natural. Like it takes NBA teams time to like really coalesce around opinion, and then it takes time for media members like the Gavonis of the world who do an unbelievable job of like getting that information and like sifting through and like, all right, like what's spin, what's not, what's real, what's consistent. Every person I talk to says, and you kind of get there. And so I don't think NBA teams necessarily maybe believed that Cedric Coward was like a lock first round pick, a month and a half ago, but like maybe each individual team thought there's a pretty good chance he's going to go in the first round. And if you talk to all those people, it takes a little while. All of a sudden, now we can see the clearer picture.
Yeah. These NBA scouts have been following these players since they're very, very young in high school. Some of them even in middle school. They're sending scouts to AAU events. They're sending scouts to colleges across the country. It goes so much deeper that like these guys have so much information and so much firsthand on all of these players that the combine, I think, at the end of the day, probably becomes a bigger deal for the interviews than for everything else. But to the players that have announced they're coming back or have not announced quite yet, I think one of the big ones that is still in the air is Tahad Pettiford. Auburn would be in a really difficult spot at the point guard position without him. What is the word on him, and what is Auburn's plan if he doesn't come back?
Yeah, I would say coming into the combine, it was probably like a 65-35 or a 70-30. Like we're going to have him. And I think it's gotten a little dicier. I still do think he probably comes back. Like if I'm a betting man, I'm like sort of 60-40 or 55-45. But I do think he helped himself. Again, I know I just said the whole thing like, oh, the combine's not that important. Like for someone like Tahad, it was, right? Because he had an opportunity to measure and prove that, yes, he's over 6 feet tall, which was going to be like a big mental block to a lot of these NBA people. He got a chance to be a true point guard and play with other players that he hasn't played with before, not be like the spark plug 6-man type. And he was awesome in day one, like was clearly the best player on the floor. And he had an opportunity to show off his athletic testing and traits and things like that. And I think overall, like he painted a pretty good picture for himself. And that makes it more feasible for him to stay in if he wants to, right? I feel pretty good that if he's all in on the process, he will get a guaranteed contract. But he's also someone, and I think, for someone like Tahad, what's most important is really getting to the NBA at the right time. It's less like where you're drafted and more like, are you ready to be in a position to stick once you're there? And I think Tahad's someone that can not only improve his stock to the point where now he's like a top 20 pick after next year at Auburn, but I think he's also someone that could be more ready to play in NBA games and less likely to not get their contract renewed when your option's up in a couple years, right? Like those are the things that I think agents are thinking about. Like how can we set our guy up for sustained success as a pro and not, okay, we snuck into the first round. We have 3 guaranteed years to figure it out, right? Like that obviously that's a great thing. But if you're Tahad and you're a young player, and it's increasingly hard for young players in the NBA, 18, 19-year-olds, I think there's 100%, thinking of like, all right, let's make sure let's obviously make sure we're striking when the iron's hot, but also let's make sure we're going at a position where it'll actually benefit us long term. And I think Tahad's someone who could benefit from another year in college for that reason alone.
Guys?
He's probably a guy that enters the season as one of the favorites for SEC Player of the Year, and in an SEC that I think is clearly a tad below where it was last year. Big Ten probably did just as good of a job in the portal. The SEC it doesn't feel like has it feels a little more open outside of Florida at the top than it did last year, where it felt like there were just so many elite teams, and Pettiford coming back to Auburn would give Auburn as good a chance as anyone to be a top team in the SEC once again. But I kind of mentioned it. If he does stay in, does Auburn just kind of ride with what they have, or do they have one potential play that they can make?
I would imagine they'll at least be in the market. I don't know that there's like a surefire, yes, we're doing this maneuver, because there's not really a point guard. Like, I could see a world where they like try to hop into the Des Claude sweepstakes or someone like that. But again, the options are limited there. I think they explore internationally. They do have Caden Magwood coming in, who I think will be good, not quite to the level of Tahad, but like he's an impact freshman to me. Tahad this year, not Todd next year, obviously.
Yeah.
Is what I'm more so saying. But he's like a legit bucket getter and very, very talented offensively. So that would be one to watch. I do expect they would add someone, if nothing else, because they only have 9 players right now. If Tahad doesn't come back to Auburn, but I don't know that it's a guaranteed like, oh, we got a superstar addition, like $3 million player type. And that's the other thing. I mean, even if Todd comes back, like the number won't be what it would take to get like maybe the highest level player they'd have to replace him with. Like they'll probably get him for like under $2 million.
Yeah, and you look at the transfer portal right now, like who's the best point guard available? Des Claude, like he can play point guard, but is he
kind of a point guard?
Like who's the best true point available? Like is it Keza Giffa? Like is it?
Yeah, it's probably international at that point. Like it almost has to be. It's like, all right, like which 22-year-old would like to make $2 million next year? It's basically
essentially. Jonathan, what were you about to say?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, were there any decisions, going back to school or staying in the draft that like truly surprised you?
Milo Suzanne did. Yaxel was always sort of 50-50 to me. And so obviously like his stock was really strong, and sort of logically speaking, it made sense for him to stay in, but it did feel like you could take him at face value that he was up in the air. Milos, I mean, Houston was planning on him to be gone, by all accounts. Milos was certainly planning to be gone. And I talked to him at the combine, and he was like, I said to him, I was like, look, like there's a lot of guys in your stature who will make as much or more in NIL than they would make as like a second round pick. And he said, like, that's not super important to me. Like, I want to be a pro. Like, it's not about that. And so for him to turn around and go back, I think was a little surprising. But I think he's a guy who sees the opportunity and a potential return, and like what he could do for his stock with a full season of at Houston, and a complete season at Houston. Obviously, he was struggled early on last year. With a really good team around him, obviously will help him quite a bit. I also think, again, this is where like agents can help. Like a lot of people made a big thing of like the Pop Isaacs flip. Pop Isaacs and Milo Suzanne have the same agent. So like that was like an easier pivot on both sides, because everybody could kind of be in communication. And so I think Houston felt like, hey, like he's the missing piece for us. Like, all respect to Pop, like we'd much rather have Milos. And I think Milo saw an opportunity to improve his stock, but I was still surprised. I mean, even as of last week, I would have said there was almost no chance he goes back.
And Pop Isaac's going to Texas A&M because of that. A&M now, they had Duke Miles for 6 minutes. So did the entire rest of the country. So now they get Pop Isaacs as kind of that replacement. They also have Rylan Griffin. That is going to be one of the most fascinating teams to watch in the SEC, without a doubt, especially if they play as fast as Bucky is used to playing. Alex Condon coming back to Florida gives the Gators a return of Thomas Houck, Alex Condon, Ruben Chinyelu, and also Micah Hanlockton, all 4 guys from their national championship winning front court. How good can this Gators team be?
Yeah, I think very good. National title good, probably. I think you could argue talent wise, they'll have more than they had a year ago. I don't know that the fit is necessarily perfect, but I think if you would have looked last year, you might have had qualms with fit in some regard. Like, how's Walter going to play point guard? How's like how is the dynamic with all these bigs? Right? You sort of make your own destiny when you have good talent and can figure it out. And that's what Florida's been able to do. Something I expect them to be able to do again. I know there's questions about Xavier and Boogie Flan playing together. I think that'll be fine. Like, I think it's very overblown when you have like multiple combo guards. Like, oh, well, who's the point and who's this? Like, if Florida had added like a true wing instead of Boogie Flan, people would have said, well, Florida doesn't have enough ball handlers. How are they going to do that? Like, at some point there's always a hole you can point to. But I'm not super concerned about that. I think the dynamic there is really good. I worry a little bit about Houck at the 3 full time, but it's really not full time, right? Like, people it's one thing like looking at your Excel sheet and having like projected starting 5 and like Thomas Houck's the 3-man, but like Thomas Houck's probably playing like 12 minutes a game at the 3, right? He's playing 12 minutes a game at the 3. He's backing up Condon at the 4. You're gonna have your bigger wings like AJ Brown and CJ Ingram in there. So that was sort of a meandering way to say that I like their team. I like their talent quite a bit. I do think it'll be different defensively, not having like that stopper on the perimeter that Elijah Martin was. I also think just like culturally what he was as a leader was huge for that team. Like, he was the heart and soul. But they should be a good defense because of their size and because of Chinyelu. They should be a dynamic offense because of their guard play. There's a lot to like here. And again, I don't know that I'm like, oh, they're tiers above everybody else in the SEC, but I think you certainly could make a strong case that they're number 1 in the SEC. And if they're number 1 in the SEC, they should have a strong case to be, top 3-ish nationally.
Jonathan?
Yeah, another guy that we're still kind of waiting on, I think, is Otege Owe for Kentucky. And obviously, like, this is a team that added a ton in the portal. They're deep. Like, does Kentucky can this team just kind of roll with what they have if Owe decides to go pro, or is there another avenue that they would look towards?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine they would try to pivot to like a Jameer Watkins type situation, but I also would, this is again where things get challenging, right? Like, Jameer Watkins, I've been told, is probably like a slight lean to stay in the draft. Now, maybe that changes if Kentucky puts like a $4 million offer on the table for him, and like the starting wing at Kentucky is a different role than like, oh, I'm gonna go like get the scraps at Ole Miss or something like that, right? It's a different sell. But like, will Kentucky know from Owe in time in order to make that offer and compel a Jameer Watkins to make sure he hits the portal, right? So I think that's the question, is sort of the order of operations. I would be a little surprised if they did nothing, just because, number one, you had dollars allocated to Owe that you could use somewhere else. And again, if it's reclassed a high school kid, like, I would imagine that like a Tyron Stokes reclass push becomes much more real if I'm Kentucky, if I lose Otege Owe. I would imagine that a push for an international guy would become a lot more real. So that'd be like the type of stuff that I'm watching, but I personally would be surprised if Otege stays in. I think it would be there's some guys where I'm like, you couldn't make a bad decision. I think Otege Owe would be like making a mistake not to go back to Kentucky. I think he should make his college money while he can.
Yeah, and that's not a program that is shy with the money. They have not been shy about that this offseason. You mentioned Tyron Stokes. Do you think there is a program out there at this point that could be pushing for a reclass from him with what's going on. Is it possible that Kansas is going to really make a push? Because I know we've heard there's been a lot of buzz about Kansas and Stokes, and they lose Darion Williams. Is that a realistic possibility at this point?
I'm not probably the best guy to ask on the Tyrann front. There's other people that are much more plugged in than I am. That being said, like I've been told at this point, it's 2026 until it's not. And so I would not necessarily work on the assumption that's the move that they'll be able to make. But I do think it's an avenue that Kansas will explore without question, because that's the type of guy they need, right? They've been swinging for these bigger wings, had the Dame Sarr push, had the Darion push. We'll have other pushes. I imagine they're in the Jameer Watkins sweepstakes in some regard. They will, like, Kansas is like guaranteed to add someone else, and I imagine like they will be swinging for guys like Tyrann. So I would expect that avenue to get exhausted by the Jayhawks here in the coming days and weeks, but I don't think it's a lock by any means that he reclassifies or that he can reclassify. There always are some like academic limitations to that.
Jonathan?
Do you think that with Stokes, there's anything to read into the fact that like he wasn't playing AAU to start the spring and then decided to start playing?
Yeah, I don't know. I know a lot of people have made that argument, case, etc. It is somewhat compelling. I also think there was a lot of guys that like got told basically they got given bad advice essentially by people who are like, you don't need AAU. What are you doing? Like, you just protect your stock, go play USA basketball, whatever. And then like we remember they're like 17-year-olds who have like friends and like want to play basketball. And they want to be, and they're competitive. Like Tyrann Stokes is a very competitive guy. Like every time I watch him play, I'm like, all right, this guy like loves to compete. And so like you're gonna turn down the chance to like try to go win Peach Jam with Jason Crow because you might reclassify. Like there's no reason not. Like what's he gonna do? Like turn his ankle and all of a sudden Kansas is gonna want him? Like it doesn't make sense. So I think logically speaking, I think I wouldn't necessarily read into it, but it is some like interesting sort of circumstantial evidence that maybe 2026 is more on the table.
Because like Josan Sannon and Oswin were both playing AAU last spring, and they both ended up reclassifying.
Sannon played in July, which was like absurd. Like I think he had already committed to Arizona State, and he like I was in Rock Hill, and I'm like looking at like I'm watching BABC. I'm like, why is Josan Sannon here? Like, why is Arizona State allowing this? Is this even legal? Like, what are we doing? But he just had to get his shots up. So,
yeah, he was like supposed to go to Arizona like at one point too.
Yeah, and like Caleb Love comes back. Josan posts something about that, and Josan flips 10 minutes later.
God,
Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm like. We haven't talked about Miles Bird yet, right?
No, we have not.
Because like, I don't know. It kind of seems like he tested really well and like played really well at the combine, but like we haven't gotten a decision from him yet. And I think that like San Diego State could end up being like really good if they like, regardless of if they get him back or not. But like, I think he's the type of player that could like take them to another level.
Yeah, the upside changes without question. He's someone who doesn't have as much leverage because he didn't portal. And I don't think San Diego State has like unlimited bags of money to throw at him. I do think he'd get paid, but I don't think it'd be like, oh man, if I'm Miles Bird, I'm getting $3 million to go to San Diego State, or, maybe a two-way for 500, right? It's probably a closer calculus. I think he's someone again that could benefit maybe from another year of school. I was very impressed with the combine scrimmages though. Like, and I know a lot of people were like the way he played defensively, his impact, his shot looked better. It's still like a weird form, but like he was making them and looked confident doing it. His frame is really lean. It's a concern. He's not super big. He's like he's under 6'5" without shoes. So he's not a big wing. He's a two guard. But I think there's some intrigue there NBA wise. And so he'd be a guy I wouldn't be shocked to see stay in, but I still think more likely than not, I would guess he goes back to SDSU. And I think you're 100% right that the upside changes if you add him back to this mix, because then you have continuity with two high level players in him and Guath. You have an upgraded point guard in Sean Newman. You have bigger wings who can make shots. Like all of a sudden, it gets pretty interesting. I think they'll probably be a team that I slot in the back end of the top 25 regardless. But if he's there, you could argue that that's like a team in the teens with a ceiling to win 30 games or something like that.
And it's not just those two guys returning. It's Reese Waters returning. It's Pharaoh Compton returning. It's BJ Davis returning. Taj DeGorville. It's basically all of their rotation guys, or most of their rotation guys, coming back and giving them another boost, giving them another leap. That is one of the best programs in the country at developing talent. And I feel like I mention that on every offseason podcast that we talk about San Diego State, because it doesn't really get talked about a ton. They just end up with guys that are better than they were the previous year. You saw what happened with Jaden Ledee specifically is like the one that is the big one to point out. But they've done it with guys. Miles Bird did it. Magoon Guath came in and redshirted, immediately made an impact. We've seen guys get better there, and I think we're going to see plenty of guys get better there. If Miles Bird comes back, I think we're looking at the slam dunk, Mountain West preseason favorite, and a team that will be challenging and will be a top 25 team for most of the year. Now, back to guys that have not made their decisions quite, or guys that have made their decisions. Yesterday, we got the official PJ Haggerty to Kansas State. Like, better than what they did with Coleman Hawkins last year, but still feels kind of desperation-y from K-State.
Yeah, like it's funny because they have been in scramble mode. Their roster has not necessarily had like a clear vision this whole, March, April, May. They've had to pivot a lot of times. They've went pretty heavy on the international thing. I know they already have the public commitment of Andre Kostic, who I think is a super high level player. He's someone that people I trust who are very plugged in Europe. That's someone that people thought has a chance to like be a pro. Now, is he someone who's going to come in and be like a elite one and done? I don't know. I'm not saying he's Yegor or Kasparis or someone of that ilk, but he's very, very good, right? And he's like an upside swing that they need. So I think they've done a nice job of sort of balancing like the young, intriguing talent like that with the old, proven Haggerty, Nate Johnson, super high floor backcourt, right? I think it'd be much. And this is like probably getting way like into like woozy land of like whatever like Kevin's brain is thinking at any moment. But I think we spend not enough time thinking about teams in the context of like floors and ceilings and whose floors might be really bad if things don't work. Like I don't think people thought enough. Like I think people assumed K-State was a very high floor situation last year because they were old and talented. And they were not a high floor situation. They were a really low floor situation because they had really bad guards and they had like combustible personalities and funky fits like across the board, right? Like I think the floor is very high actually for this Kansas State team because you have like one of the best guards in the country who like you pretty much know what he's going to be. At every level, he's done exactly this, right? And PJ Haggerty. Like he's going to fly at the rim with reckless abandon and get fouled a lot. And Nate Johnson's solid. They have some funky pieces that I don't love. But I do think they're not done. Now you will hear more international names. I know they have been connected publicly to Elias Rapike, I believe is the pronunciation. I could be wrong on that. He's another guy who's like playing rotation minutes in the EuroLeague this year. Like it's a different world of talent that you're getting. I think he's like 21 or 22. And they're also, I believe, involved with at least one more big who could help them internationally. So it'll be an interesting bet. It's not like a known commodity roster the same what last year's was. Like everybody knew all those names and like how would they fit was really the question. Like people will be learning on the fly what Elias Rapike or Andre Kostic is in college basketball. But I think K-State has like a real chance to somehow come out of this, stick the landing, and be a tournament team after a lot of criticism last year earned of Jerome Tang.
And kind of going back to that Europe, that whole European basketball, are there just like guys out there for colleges to take like an almost unlimited supply? Because it feels like whenever this conversation has gone to, oh, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Oh, they'll just get an international guy. Are there just like international guys growing on trees?
It's certainly not unlimited. But I think especially at certain positions, there's more supply than there is demand at this point, because I think people don't necessarily have a good understanding of just how little these guys in most cases are making overseas compared to what they would make in college. There's a lot of guys who are like very high level players who are making like 75 grand a year overseas, essentially, something like that. Right. And so like, yes, it's great. If they think they're a $2 million player, great, but like they're going to have to settle for 700 because 700 is better than 75. Right. And so there's some guys like that who, have been interested in the college route, who are either, younger talents who are like, trying to get real minutes in the, in their pro leagues, or older guys who just want the big payday and the exposure of the American game. Whichever route that is, there's a lot of guys who can find their way to eligibility if you really want to, and would be incredible, it would be worthwhile gambles essentially for college teams that have holes. And so there will be guys you hear about over the next days and weeks coming over still, guys who've been committed, who just, they haven't been publicly announced because they're finishing up their pro seasons and there's contract negotiations and whatnot. But like Gonzaga should have a point guard here relatively soon flying in. I mentioned Rabbi K. There's been a lot of public reporting connecting De Ritter, who's playing in Spain right now, is from Belgium, to Virginia. Like that's another one that should happen. Assuming that there's assuming they get over some eligibility humps here and there. That's another one that we should hear get done. So to answer your question, no, it's not unlimited. But college basketball is a much better situation for most of these guys than pro, if the money is right. And so if you're losing a $1 million to $2 million player out of the draft pool, the money will be right. And so then it becomes very easy to woo certain guys.
It does feel.
Do you think we're going to kind of change the way we evaluate as like a college basketball media ecosystem? Change the way we evaluate incoming talent to college basketball and focus a little more, just like, obviously we can't focus on it as much as we focus on, say, Peach Jam, on Chipotle Nationals, like the big events here, because no outlet is sending you to, because Sports Illustrated, Sports Illustrated is not sending you to Paris for ANGT. But is there like a way that we can be a little more prepared for this next year? A way that we can do a little more research, a way that the media ecosystem, I'm not just asking you this as a fan, I'm asking you this as a media member myself. How can I be more prepared for this?
It's a good question. It's something I've tried to fight the battle with a little bit, with folks in the media who are friends who are like, well, these guys are all just, dart throws. It's just a dart throw. You have no idea. It's like, well, no, you have a pretty good idea. Like for instance, Ilyas Kamardine, who's going to Ole Miss.
Ole Miss,
he's
right?
He's like a potential starter. He's $1 million player. I've watched the film. I know he's pretty good. But we can just we can do some very simple analysis. Ilyas is 21 years old. He's averaging 8-2-2 in the top French league. The other guys on his team, that are Americans, I'll just read you the imports. Sharif Cooper, Kyler Edwards, Marcus McDuffie, Phil Booth, Christian Sengfelder. I would venture a guess that if a guy is averaging 8 points a game and playing 20 minutes a game and it's pretty efficient in a league like that with teammates like that, he's probably not a complete dart throw of a college player. He's probably going to be okay. I'm not saying he's an all SEC player. I'm not saying he's going to take over the world. I'm not saying he's better than Phil Booth, even though he has better numbers than Phil Booth. But that is a pretty safe bet. And if you look at the international kids who came this year, you can take some learnings away, right? A lot of the guys who are younger, who are 18 or 19, who are coming from youth systems, yes, they sat and didn't play, right? Alexander Gavelyugov, who went to Villanova, who's going to Santa Clara next year. He'd be a good example of that. He was in a youth system. He had talent. He played well at Euro camp. People got excited. He goes high major. He needs time, just like any other freshman. But if you look at like the older guys who came over, right, the Tomislav Ivicic like Tomislav Ivicic averaged 7-4 in the Adriatic League and turned around and averaged 13-8 at Illinois as a freshman, right, or a sophomore, I guess, because of his eligibility. So now Illinois is adding the guy who is nearly the MVP of the Adriatic League, and they're asking him to be their 5th starter. Like again, safe to say it's not going to be horrible. And again, it's going to take time for people, and it's not realistic to expect you or Jonathan or Jeff Goodman or anyone in between to sit there and be an expert on these things. I am not. I'm nowhere near one. I know people who are or are close to that, who've been to, as you've said, been to ANGT or been to FIBA U19 World Cup or U20 Euro or something like that, right? And I can lean on their opinion, but just having some baseline context for who these guys are and what they're around and what they're producing on a day-to-day basis, that should get you a pretty good ways in terms of sifting through, all right, who's a guy who is probably not a serious player in year one and sort of a lottery ticket and a bench guy, and who's a guy that has a chance to really make an impact, similar again to how we do freshman rankings, right? Again, if you go to Peach Jam, you see a 6'9", 17-year-old who wants to shoot a million threes and isn't that productive yet, but he's talented. Cool. That's an interesting guy, but he's probably not a guy I'm projecting into the rotation at Florida next year. But 6'6" physical CJ Ingram, who's a starter at Montverde, yeah, that's a safer bet. So I think learning the context of the situations they're in, just like we do the context in high school, is probably the biggest thing. But it's not an easy thing, and it's not going to be a snap our fingers and everybody understands this stuff.
I think to an extent, it feels a little bit like the start of the transfer portal era, where some coaches are just definitively not ready to use this to its fullest extent yet. The international pool, it feels like eventually Tom Izzo is going to have some sort of complaint about it.
Oh, they're ruining the game.
It's very true, and look, I think a lot of it's now which head coach can find an assistant who can make it their niche and be an expert, because
UCLA had one.
Yeah, UCLA had Evo, but I think there's a lot of guys, right? Like Kansas State has an assistant who is the 4th assistant who's made it his thing to recruit internationally, and they're going to deliver 2 or 3 really good players for them because they have resources, and because, and this is really the important thing, he has the ability to communicate to his boss and to people who aren't as familiar with this world. This is what it should look like, and this is what it means that this guy's averaging this, right? And I think even inside coaching staffs, there's a lot of the hey, so you're recruiting this kid for us. Can you explain to me what this guy's league is compared to what the Big 12 is? So how does this guy compare to X top transfer, because we're paying that money for this guy? And I think, and that's a hard question in a lot of cases. And it's not it's not usually as easy as well, this guy is better than Des Claude, or this guy is better than RJ Lewis, or whatever the case. But it's all that type of information is the stuff that coaches are trying to get comfortable with, and some have gotten comfortable with it a lot faster than others, partially because of their willingness to evolve, partially because they've had to do it in some cases to recruit better players. It's not an easy thing, but I think that's what you're trying to figure out, is get a sense of levels here and there.
Yeah, I know the Mount has CD Saul as an assistant. He was at the basketball academy in Africa. Brought in a kid from there last year. I think they're going to be bringing in another one this year. So that's a good point that you make with the way the staffs are going to be built. You mentioned
you have the 2 extra assistant coaches now too.
Yeah, that's probably a much bigger deal at the high major level than the mid major level. The mid major teams that can afford the 5 assistants are probably not having a ton of these problems in the first place. But we go back to you mentioned RJ Lewis, he's gone, right?
I'm not 100% confident in that. I think RJ Lewis really wants to be gone. He has no interest in playing college basketball this year.
But does the NBA have any interest in RJ Lewis?
Yeah, obviously they have some. Probably not as much as RJ would hope. Here's what I would say with RJ. I think a lot of people will view this as it'd be moronic to turn down $2 million in college or $3 million in college to go take a 2A for $500,000. the one thing I'll say is like RJ's probably not getting better stock wise than this. He's already 22. He just won Big East Player of the Year on a 2 seed. Like if he just goes to like the scrap heap and like picks up whichever team will pay him the most and like shoots all the balls, like that to me has like big disaster potential. And that's not a knock necessarily on RJ. I just don't think it's who he is as a player.
Not a shooter.
Like, yeah, it's not who he should be. And if his goal is to go prove that he can shoot, I think it's going to be like an ugly year. And so, you know, it's easy to say, hey, you know, you should just go take the money in all cases. And I think I think financially it probably is the right decision to go back to college. But if RJ is really set on being an NBA player, like I don't think people can say, oh, it's easy enough. Like he'll get his 2A next year. Like we said this about Coleman Hawkins. He was like a good player at the combine a year ago. This year he didn't even get a G League camp invite. Like there is downside. So yes, if you're Coleman and you made $2 million, maybe you made the right move. Like I'm not saying he didn't. I actually think in a lot of ways it was probably smart for his career long term, just take the money and run. But if you're not making the decision financially, I think you could certainly argue that RJ would be better served just like going in when his stock is as hot as it's going to get.
Yeah, there are. It does feel like there are more guys, like maybe not more guys every year, but there are like a select group of players now who it's like, yeah, we know with this guy that next year would be the most money he ever makes playing basketball if he returns to college.
100%.
Where would who would be interested in RJ Lewis? Everyone?
I mean, it's hard to say everyone because everyone would be interested at the right price. The problem is there's very few people who have the money to make it the right price, right? Like that's the problem. Like if everybody was given $2 million and said, hey, you want to go bid on RJ? I think most people were like, yeah, we'll probably take the Big East Player of the Year. But like, who's actually in position to have the money, have the like 2 to 3 that you need like to get in the door? I don't know. Right? Is it like an Ole Miss? Is it someone like of that ilk? Is it like I've heard some random names like potentially being interested in throwing a bag around there. Like I was told by someone, and this is just like a guy who's like relatively plugged into New York City basketball. And I saw him out when we were recruiting in Memphis at EYBL 2 weekends ago now. Like he mentioned Pittsburgh to me. Like, I mean, like what a world we'd live in where like the Big East Player of the Year goes to Pitt, like to transfer. And that's not even a knock on Pitt. It's like, dude,
Pitt's had Big East players.
Pitt has, but I think they thought they had their last one until now. So, you know, I don't know if it'll be like I'm just saying like the market could be really random. Like it's easy to say, yeah, he's obviously a blue blood guy. Excuse me, he could go to Kansas, he could do this, whatever. I don't think RJ Lewis is like necessarily signing to go play with Darren Peterson. I don't like maybe that's what he decides is like the best move for his career, or maybe it's just the most money. But like, I would not be shocked if it's sort of an out of left field. Like we have some money and we're gonna go take a shot on a guy late.
Jonathan, the big news of today so far, or one of the big pieces of news of today that we haven't gotten to, Yaxel Lendeborg going back to Michigan. I know, Jonathan, you have a bunch of thoughts on this, so I'm kind of going to let you riff here.
Yeah, so like Yaxel felt like one to me that had becoming like kind of trending towards him going back in the last like week or so, last two weeks. Like I think at one point it was a true like 50-50, but I actually had like heard that it was like more 80-20 that he goes back in the last couple weeks. So it like didn't like totally surprise me when the news came out today. Now in terms of like this roster, I mean, Michigan's deep. Like I think they're gonna be one of the better half court offenses in the country next year. They have a playmaker in Cadeau. You now have like this defensive stud, athletic dude in Lendeborg who like will probably be in the same position he is right now at this time next year. And like you add him to an already deep group with Perez, Mara, who should give you like a good 20 minutes. So like I just think that like I thought Michigan was already set up to be pretty good, Sam, for next year. And obviously Yaxel raises that ceiling by a lot.
Yeah, the ceiling is what you get here because they were already going to have one of the best front courts. They already have one of the best coaches. And Yaxel Lendeborg, I posted a stat last year. It was the 4 players that averaged. I don't remember exactly what the numbers were. I could find it. But I was working on a story about Bryant, and I did a stat query on CBB Analytics, and 16 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Only 4 players: Cooper Flagg, Brooks Barnheiser, Earl Timberlake, and Yaxel Lendeborg. And that's a pretty special group to be a part of in college basketball last year. You bring that to Michigan, where he might not need to be play. He could play a little on the perimeter as well. He could play a little bit inside. He can do whatever they need him to do. I think that it's going to be a really good fit for what Dusty wants, because he's just so versatile.
Yeah, he's a great player, obviously. I do think it probably, as much as anything, like solidifies that the floor is super high for Michigan, because I think the ceiling was always there. If you got the best Merez and the best Ade Mara, like, you were probably gonna be really, really good. But I think the thing that's probably different with Yaxel is like you take away a lot of like the potentially bad outcomes of oh shit, Ade Mara is still like a weird role player, and not like a super functional guy. Or Merez is, as fun as he is to watch at times, he's still like a 6'8" center who doesn't shoot threes, who doesn't protect the rim at an elite level, whatever. Like, there were some concerns I had with that construction, and Yaxel solves a lot of them. I've seen a lot of like the Danny Wolf comp with Yaxel. I do think it's gonna be a lot different, mostly because Trey Donaldson and Elliot Cadeau are like completely different in terms of like off-ball players. Donald, like, I don't think they took Wolf envisioning Wolf having to be on the ball as much as he was. And then, as the point guard position shaped up for them, it became obvious that their best playmaker was Danny. I think this will still very much be Cadeau's team, which some people might view that as a good thing. Some people might view that as a bad thing. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, right? There will be some bumps with that, but I do think the ball's in his hands quite a bit. And I would expect to see a lot of him on the ball, let Yaxel kind of fly around and make plays. Like, I don't think he'll be their primary initiator. But I think they have some incredible lineup flexibility. Yaxel's an incredibly high floor guy for this team. Like, I think his floor is like fringe all conference, and his ceiling is probably, All-American, fringe national play of the year conversation. So, obviously massive for Michigan. As Jonathan, I think, said, it was, I think it was trending this way. And I do think maybe people overblew his draft stock. Not to say he wasn't like a potential first round pick, but I think people were like, oh, he's going to go like 18th. How could he possibly stay in the draft? Like, I don't know about that. Like, I think it was probably a little bit more of a wide range than people realize. I will also read you a text that I got from an NBA scout this morning, who, after the actual decision, he said, "These guys are nuts. This draft is really shallow. It's a big risk to be pulling out and hoping that next year it's somehow better for you." Which I thought was interesting. It hasn't been talked about a lot. And I do think Yaxel probably, like, if you made me bet, will Yaxel go like top 20 next year? I would absolutely bet no at the moment. Like, I'm not betting that like magically this is going to make him like a clear, top 20 pick, which I think Yaxel probably hopes is the case. I think there's a world he goes lower next year, even after a good year at Michigan. If he doesn't have a great year, he has a good year. Like, I think things get maybe a little dicey, but huge win for Michigan, obviously. Huge win for college basketball. He's a fun player, and he'll get to be on a huge stage.
All right, Jonathan, what else do we got?
I was just gonna add like a couple more things on Yaxel. Like, I think he probably is, of the guys going back to school, he's probably one of the safer bets to like he'll be in the same spot next year. That like I think that like just the way Dusty coaches, he adapts to the personnel he has so well. I mean, he had a second weekend team playing 2 7-footers, one of them playing on ball a lot, and then he obviously goes to a Final Four with like a team that has like no true point guard and is playing 4 like wings with a 7-footer. So like I think that like that system, whatever it ends up being, will probably be good for him. And just like the other and like kind of like I said, like he's probably not a player that like was a lock to go in the first round, but like I think like if you told me like he would go in the 20s this year, and like he comes back next year and goes 25, I think that's probably a very realistic outcome for him.
Yeah, just like a few more names we haven't heard officially from. Nick Martinelli, like, he's coming back, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there's no question about that one.
Yeah,
He'll be at Northwestern. He'll be happy.
yeah, because we haven't heard officially. I think we heard officially from Toby Lawal earlier.
Yes, just now I think Goodman tweeted that Toby is coming back.
Yeah, that still the greatest end of season quote maybe in ACC tournament history that he gave.
Yeah.
they thought we were going to be asked. Well, I don't even remember the full quote, but it was I could find it.
They thought we were going to be asked. We were still asked, but we were not as bad as people thought we were going to be.
Yes, that was it.
Yeah, Virginia Tech's attention now pivots to Neoclis Avdalas, who was playing in the combine scrimmages. He's visited Virginia Tech. If he told me at the combine that he's probably going to college if he does not stay in the draft, I think he probably will withdraw. I think he'll withdraw. I actually don't know if his deadline would be this week or it would be in a couple weeks because he's not an active college basketball player. So I don't know if we're waiting, like if this is like a couple more week game or if this is like a tomorrow thing. But either way, that is one to watch. Virginia Tech is very involved. I've been told they're probably the favorite at this point. There are some bigger fish or bigger dollar numbers that could potentially come in, but he would like swing there. He would be a huge like ceiling addition as like a 6'8", like versatile 3-4 kind of jumbo wing. Just give him like a talent swing on an otherwise pretty dull roster.
Yeah. Obviously, we got the Carter Knox coming back for Arkansas, Brazil back as well. So Arkansas, they might not have a ton of shooting on that roster, but they are set up to be a top 20, top 15 team in year two for John Calipari. Bringing back a bunch of his not as many one and dones as he had at Kentucky, but you getting the year two of those highly touted recruits is big for building something up at Arkansas.
Yeah, someone tweeted that Arkansas is like number 1 minutes continuity in the SEC, which is like sort of remarkable. Like if you had told me like if you how about this, if you had told me March 1st of 2024 that John Calipari would have the number 1 minutes continuity in the SEC at Arkansas, I'd be like confused on a number of levels. But certainly, I mean, if you could have done this on May 1st of last year, I wouldn't have bet on Arkansas being that team. But yeah, huge for them.
Yeah, it feels like they really turned a corner last year with that win over Kentucky, and it really feels like they're like the culture is starting to build there. Who knows? Who knows what could happen? John Calipari has fooled me before in ways both good and bad. We will see what happens.
They also have a definitive NBA point guard this year, which they did not have last year.
Yeah, big Jerry Takeoff guy, and just a lot of talent on that roster for sure. I don't think we missed anybody. Jonathan, did we miss anybody?
I'm kind of just scrolling through rosters right now to make sure. Jaden Bradley, was he in the like I fully expected him to come back, but
yeah, I believe he's testing, but I wouldn't. Yeah. I'm not sure if the NBA is testing on him, but he's testing the NBA.
Hey, good for him.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone else, Sam.
Yeah, all right. Got any Princeton scheduling news for us this year?
Unfortunately, I have no Princeton scheduling news. I may have Loyola scheduling news if people want. I'll put it on the show. Why not? Loyola and Colorado State are starting a home and home series that I believe I should get a 10%. I should get like a 10% cut of the gate for, but that's not good.
I was going to say that's the Kevin Sweeney classic.
Yeah, negotiations ongoing on that front, but yeah, if anyone makes it this far into the podcast, they can take their little scheduling nugget and keep it moving. How about that?
We can.
I actually do have like one more like very random question that I just thought of because I've been like losing my mind lately. Kevin, have you been like down to OTE? Like, what's the like appeal for like high school kids going and playing there?
Yeah, so I'm like weirdly probably OTE's biggest defender
Okay.
in the college basketball world. I actually think it's like a really good situation for the right kid. It's not by any means the best situation. Like for everyone, it's not. Like I would say that. Like it is. I don't think the games are overly competitive. I talked to one college coach who was basically like, "Give me an EYBL Classic game 10 times out of 10 over an OTE league game." But like, if you are a mature kid who's ready to be in like a college-like environment, OTE is great for you. Like I'll give you two examples. Like Jasper Johnson, I don't think OT is a great situation for Jasper Johnson. Jasper Johnson wants to shoot every ball. He wants to be given. He's going to get given unlimited freedom instead of getting like actually like drilled down. Like, hey, you have to like learn how to play in structure, whatever, because the games have no structure, right? But like, Amari Evans going to Tennessee, OT was an unbelievable environment for him because he's a 3-and-D guy. So he learned how to stand in the corner and shoot. He learned how to be in a high-level environment. He worked with elite, like college strength staff already, college level, pro level strength staff already. The setup down there is like unbelievable.
Yeah, their facilities are like nuts, right?
Right. Yeah, it's great. And again, for the right kid, I think it's an awesome environment, and I think it's the closest thing in a lot of ways to like the academy system that everyone props up in Europe.
Okay,
but I do think you're like, if this is like an ANGT thing, like, yeah, like they have players that do unserious stuff, and like it's going to take time to like the content business of OTE and the basketball business of OTE are two different things. And I think unfortunately at times they're going to merge. And I think at times there's guys that like are doing it because they want to get Instagram famous. Like if you're going to OTE to get Instagram famous, you're probably not going to get the most out of OTE, I guess is the way I would put it.
Yeah, it was like
OTE to be Instagram famous. Jonathan and I have probably texted some mean things about you in our group chat.
It was like definitely a part AGNT question, but also like I've kind of been making my way through the 2025 class and like watching all these kids, and like some of the games that I'll turn on from them are just like totally not basketball games.
Yeah, I mean it's pickup, yes, like. And it's that's very different than like if you go watch, like a UIBL Classic game.
Yeah,
I would 100% agree with that. But again, if we're comparing it to like non-prep school, regular high school basketball, it's probably still a better development system. So again, I think you can argue. I think it is a flawed place without question. I think everywhere is. I think there are some noble pursuits there, is what I would say, and I think if we give it time, there's a world where OT becomes like a really positive thing in the basketball ecosystem. I think we're just still getting there.
All right, Jonathan, you want to take us home?
Yeah. If you came to hear about Tyler Self and where he's working, you came to the right place. If you came to hear about unserious high school basketball development, you came to the right place. And if you came to hear about the latest happenings with Caleb Grill, you came to the right place. This has been Season 6, Episode 7 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. We'll see you next time.